All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. As a financial advisor, I talk to my clients about money all the time. And when it comes to money, there are many different elements. One could be how it's managed. One of it could be discussions that couples have about money. But behind the scenes, there is so much psychology to money. And with us today, I've invited Dr. Charles Chaffin to join us to talk about this very, very topic. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's I've seen a lot of your work on LinkedIn, and I know you've specialized in this area. You've done so much work on it. Can for those that haven't heard of you, can you maybe give our listeners a bit of background about what you do, and I guess what has brought you to this point, and even your most recent book as well?
Yeah, happy to. So my area, I started in education and cognition, how we learn, and moved over to my research on attention, and still write in that area. I have a book called Numb that just came out last year on attention. And then I was with CFP Board, the credentialing body for financial planners in the United States, for 12 years, leading research activities and writing books for them. And, during that time, the whole notion of not just behavioral finance, but the whole notion of psychology around money became a bigger and bigger issue for the profession and ultimately clients. And so we really started focusing on that. And I've been kind of transitioning a lot of my research and my work into that area, and borrowing from lots of different branches of, cognitive and clinical psychology and whatnot. And left CFP Board and wrote a book, co-authored a book with Brad Klontz and Ted Klontz on the psychology of financial planning, the practitioner's guide to money and behavior. And we not only do the book, but also have a number of educational programs for advisors and how to handle all of the different behaviors, conversations, and instincts that somehow relate to not only money, but just individuals' financial well-being.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was probably in my second year of it being an advisor where I realized there was more to money than, I guess, behavior or how, habits, I should say. Like for example, I'd have clients, I'd be showing them budgeting. I'd be talking to them about how to structure bank accounts, all these different things. But then sometimes it just still wouldn't work. Like there was always something holding them back from achieving it. And over time, I slowly realized that there is so much more to it. And I mean, we hear all about, this whole relationship with money that people have. And a lot of it has to do with the way we were raised and how we feel about money as well. I know it's a very, very broad topic and we can talk about this for hours, but could you maybe just probably touch on that topic and just explain why everybody treats money differently?
Yeah, it's a huge question. And, at a 30,000 foot level, you start to think that, we have all of these things working against us. It's amazing that we're able to get anywhere when it comes to financial well-being, most notably because, first and foremost, we still have, we have all of this, your listeners right now have devices that they're listening to this on that the software gets updated regularly. Yet the most important piece of hardware that we all have, which is our brains, haven't been updated in 100,000 years. And that we have instincts based upon those medieval brains, such as, they're designed for hunting and gathering and instant gratification and those types of things, which go against everything that's really important, that's important to us in trying to be successful with money. And then you add to that not only instincts, but you add to what we call money scripts, which are basically these financial flashpoints that we have that Brad and Ted and I write about, that, certain things that we remember in our childhood that somehow impact the way we address money now. So that could be, things as simple as, rich people are, you might have heard a parent say rich people are bad or something like that. And that could create elements of guilt or overspending in those individuals as adults if they're, if they're making money and whatnot. So we have a lot of things that work against us in trying to meet whatever financial goals that we have. And that's not even getting into elements of the marriage or the family element as well. So we in all of our work, we try to go ahead and identify all of the challenges, but come up with some solutions in trying to address it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that the money scripts, the things from childhood, because it does make sense. I mean, to the point where, for example, some people they'll grow up with an excuse, giving themselves, I guess, a reason to not pursue wealth, for example, because it's just never. It was always seen as like an evil topic, for example, or something that, oh yeah, our family doesn't. We don't want that, for example, and it's. And I find as well, and we've seen this all the time, but those that don't grow up with much are normally the most hungry in some cases as well. And I don't know, it could be just that they appreciate money more growing up, or it could be that they just have different behaviors. But I've just found that there's a very big distinction as well between those that grew up with, I guess you can say everything they wanted, and those that grew up with many memories of not having much of what they wanted at all.
Yeah, my head immediately goes to kind of what we call a scarcity mindset of individuals who grew up without means in some way, shape, or form. And that scarcity mindset, there's lots of great research on scarcity, whether it's related to money, whether it's related to time and meetings. It could be any number of things, but a scarcity mindset really is a lens by which we look at how we're going to spend our time, how we're going to spend our resources. And so if you grow up without means, that affects how you save. It affects how you invest. It affects how you have money on hand. And in a lot of cases, there are lots of different factors here, as we talked about. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but in a lot of cases, the folks that have a scarcity mindset and go on to, earn a little bit of money as adults, they tend to be the ones that they don't have a 6 or 9 month rainy day fund. They tend to have a 12 or 15 month rainy day fund, right? Because that's the mindset by which they're thinking about things. So absolutely. And there's a great book actually called Scarcity. And I can send that over to you if you have show notes or whatnot. That's a really fascinating look at how we kind of look at when we have less and how that impacts our behaviors.
Yeah, okay. Because even you're right, in those cases, I feel like, and again, this is just talking to clients. I'm not a expert in psychology in any way, shape, or form, but the impression that I get is that they're holding on to it because it's something that they never used to have. And I feel like, and I hear this from clients regularly, but there's even an anxiety sometimes when it comes to touching their money. So if they've built up the savings, for example, even when it comes to spending it on themselves or spending it on something, there's literally an anxiety around even talking about money. So can you maybe just touch a little bit on that as well? Because even those that are listening to this that probably do experience that, just even talking about money with their partner or with their financial advisor, what are some, I guess, a little bit of background as to maybe why they're feeling that way and what they can possibly do to try to overcome that anxiety?
Yeah, one of the primary tools to help with that, it really comes from the world of positive psychology, which is a growing area of research. And some of the things that positive psychology can give individuals who maybe are, I think about it as being kind of a little bit of a slave to their accounts, right? They're watching the numbers and they're actually going without. And in some cases, an extreme example is you have people who are living in poverty, but they're not poor, right? They become so focused on accumulating wealth for the sake of accumulating wealth that they're actually going without. And so what positive psychology could give us is really, okay, how can that wealth transfer to a life well lived, right? Or goals that are met, and so a lot of cases, what an advisor could do, and something that we write about and we teach about, is really, okay, where do we want to be in 5 years? Let's take the money out of it. What does a normal Tuesday look like for you? And it doesn't even have to be in retirement. It could be before retirement. And let's walk through what that day looks like and who's part of that. And then let's talk about how the means that this individual, this client, or this consumer has accumulated, how can it help achieve that? So now we're using that wealth as a way, a powerful tool to get people to where they want to be, as opposed to really focusing on those numbers. So that's one of the primary areas I think about positive psychology more than anything is let's use this not, and that's why sometimes I don't like, and this is kind of controversial, by the way, but when you think about the term wealth management, it really isn't about wealth management. It's about managing the individual's life goals and their financial well-being, as opposed to managing the wealth itself. So always thinking about it as a tool to a better life.
And I can very strongly agree with that, because for me, it's about giving people clarity about what they want in life. And once they have that clarity, then everything else normally falls, it just becomes clearer, because money is money. And I say this regularly, even to my clients or to anyone, that, money is money, but without goals or without a purpose behind it, it literally means nothing. Because when do you stop saving? When do you stop working? How much do you need to save? How much do you need to invest? Like it literally means nothing unless it's tied to those goals. And I like that you mentioned that 5-year thing, because it's sort of taking money away from the conversation for a second. It's just saying, look, put money aside. What would you like to, where would you like to be? And then as a financial advisor, I guess it's our job to bring money back into that picture and be like, okay, to do that, this is what you need, because there might be some limiting beliefs around what they can and can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I couldn't agree more. And the notion of goal setting, and we talk about this a lot. The advisor sometimes is the only person that asks a client, a human being, what do you want your life to be like? What are your goals? And so a lot of people haven't really examined it, right? They haven't really had that space to talk about not only where they want their life to be on a Tuesday, but where do they want their life to be, in 5 years, or where do they want what are their goals? What are their goals for their family and whatnot? And I think more and more, not just with the pandemic, but just, although the pandemic's part of it, but more and more people are isolated and lonely, and they're not getting that space to really reflect. And I think as advisors, it's no longer just about asking the question, but it's also giving that space to think about those big questions, because it's not as if people are just articulating these things to themselves or other people. In many cases, they haven't even thought about it. And so I think there's an opportunity for people to really sit back and say, where do I want my life to be? And talk to their spouse or partner if they have that relationship in their life, and say, where do we want this to go? And be thoughtful and deliberate about it, maybe for the first time.
These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a free 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au. And on that point as well, you've probably seen this just as many times as myself, and this was actually half the reason I started this podcast show, but couples don't talk about money enough, I've found. They literally talk about everything else in their life, but they don't talk about money, and especially before marriage, or before they get serious. And even after, there are couples decades later after marriage that still have separate bank accounts and all the rest of it, which is okay, but they don't even talk about what they have and what the other person's doing and what they're working on together. Does that stem from a lot of what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm not a clinical psychologist or work in the marriage and family area. I do the research well, and we write about it. And I do think it does. I think it also, there's an element in some cases too of shame. In a lot of cases, and particularly if one of the members of the couple is bringing debt into the relationship, they may not want to disclose the credit card debt or even student loan debt or something like that could be part of it. And then you also have, relative to what we talked about earlier, that you may have, you're going to likely have different financial flashpoints between that couple. There are different situations and experiences that each person has been taught in that relationship relative to their upbringing about wealth or about poverty or about investing or about saving and whatnot. And so you're likely, as you said, you're likely going to have issues there. And tied into all of that, just to get the whole thing out on the table, in a lot of cases, people are more guarded about their financial information than they are their medical information, right? It is such a seen as such a private element because there's elements of shame associated with it, or people. In a lot of cases, there's research that shows that men in a lot of cases inflate their earnings and whatnot to be more attractive to a potential mate. Well, at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road at some point if the relationship continues on. So, I think that one of the ways that you can start that process, again, this isn't my area, but one of the things that you can start that process is going back to what we just talked about. What are our goals together, and what's it going to take for us to get there? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to live as a couple together in 10 or 15 years or in our retirement? And what's it going to take for us to do that? And that can begin that process. So now we're putting out a North Star for us as a couple. We're not thinking about our accounts or comparing accounts if we've got separate accounts and have never discussed that. But let's have what our goals are together for one another, and what's it going to take, and how can we each contribute to meeting them?
Yes, and I think that discussion will just develop over time, and the way I see it is, as long as the dialogue is there and as long as it's being discussed, I feel like it will just naturally develop from there, compared to not talking about it or not knowing where to start as well. Because sometimes when you ignore something, or I guess when you're scared about talking about a topic, it's sometimes there's that awkwardness. Okay, how do we bring this up? What do we talk about? Or how do we start? It's just, I think just like anything in a relationship, it's just something that develops over time as well.
It does. The notion that, and we write about this in the book and we talk about it, this notion of financial infidelity, though, is significant. So, what happens if one of the members of the couple has debt that they haven't disclosed to their partner or spouse, or has another source of income that they haven't disclosed to a partner or spouse? And those are significant issues, and those are not necessarily, normal issues, but those require, in a lot of cases anyway, some professional assistance, maybe from a planner, maybe from a marriage and family therapist, maybe from another therapist of some sorts. Those are significantly challenging issues, but absolutely, back to the point, there's got to be a point to begin that dialogue. And to me, it seems that starting with goals is the best place, because if it's a goal, it's something that you're both excited about in the relationship, that's great for the relationship on multiple fronts. But from a financial perspective, then it's like, okay, how can we both contribute to get to that exciting place that we both want to be? And that can at least start, if there is a breakdown in communication regarding money, that can at least really start to kind of melt the ice, if you will, to get both parts of the couple talking.
Yeah, and I feel like having that discussion with someone's partner, or even having it with their financial advisor, it will help them realize that there's more to it as well. Because, for example, there's some people not some, but we all have a different relationship with money, and many would feel like the way they feel about money is how it should be. This is how it should be done, or this is how money should be treated. And someone else might have a different idea of that. And many people probably don't realize that it stems from their previous experiences or their life experience. And they think the other person's wrong, for example, and they don't realize that it is very, very complex. It's like in a couple, a very typical scenario is where one of them, for example, would be a spender and one of them's a saver. And I'll have clients tell me this. They say, he's a spender, I'm a saver, or vice versa, and they know it. And I feel like they just accept it many of the times, and they don't realize that maybe they can work on it, or maybe there's a happy medium that they should try to find. And I help them with that, of course. But I could see that causing a lot of issues as well, because if they each just accept their relationship with money and says, no, he's always going to be spending, I'm always going to be saving, I feel like that doesn't lead to a happy relationship. And it's, in a way, I see it as a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and my only friendly probably edit to that is that they say they're accepting of it, right? They're say they say that they've accepted that the other half is a spender or a saver or whatnot. Whether they actually have accepted it or not could be a different story. But it really is about finding this, and in those cases, it really is incumbent upon the advisor to really provide that space to kind of open up the dialogue, and the advisor has to really work to engage both partners in that relationship together and they equally. So they both have to be in the room, and they have to be contributing to that dialogue. You find with some advisors, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens all too frequently, where there is this, difference. One's a spender and one's a saver in the relationship, and the advisor's only talking to the husband, or just talking to the wife and not talking to both. And you have to invest the time, both as an advisor as well as a couple, in everybody being together to have the space to talk about these things.
Yeah. Exactly. I could not agree more. And yeah, and if that doesn't happen, it's almost guaranteed to cause some sort of resentment, if not straight away, or down the track. Where and it's not functional. Like, from a financial point of view, it's like having two business owners. One of them is doing things one way, one is doing it the other. The business is either just going to be treading water, or it's eventually going to sink. It's never going to excel, or it's never going to improve.
It's not. And, you look at the research, which is, tangentially related to what we're talking about, but there's lots of research on that, the term they call the household CFO, right? Which is essentially one person within the relationship is handling all of the money. And that has disastrous consequences as well, in the sense that what happens if the relationship ends due to death or divorce or separation or whatever it might be. And there are lots of data, particularly here in the States, about how disastrous that is. If the CFO is no longer, if there's no longer a household CFO and the one partner's on their own, what tends to happen is you would think that person says to themselves, well, I don't know a lot about this, I need to learn more. What tends to happen is that there's more avoidance. They actually start to avoid an advisor. They start to avoid learning more, even on the web, or getting more resources. And of course, that makes a bad problem even worse. And so having that equal partnership, whether it's because one's a spender and one's a saver, or there's different financial flashpoints, or because that there's one member of the couple as the household CFO, having that equal relationship is critical for happiness, but also it's a bit of an insurance policy in the event that something happens in the relationship.
That's true. And also the other side of it, that I've seen this personally, with some of my clients, is where there is the CFO, and that person happens to be really bad at managing money, or they don't have the skills, essentially, and then suddenly there's even more blame happening, because the person that wasn't managing the money says, oh, you've stuffed things up. And then the person that was managing it is like, well, didn't see you doing anything, so it's, so sometimes it's the one that's more skilled with money or enjoys money more that does become the household CFO, but sometimes it's the one that pulls the short straw as well, and that just decides to deal with it because the other person doesn't want to. And then suddenly it's like the unwanted child in a way. Each person's just passing it off to the other.
It's a great point. Yeah, in my scenario, I was assuming that the household CFO knew what they were doing, but your point is incredibly well taken. That in some cases, the one partner just defers to the other, and the other, the one that's in charge, doesn't really know what they're doing. And eventually, if there's any kind of disaster down the road or goals aren't met, then it's surely not going to help the relationship. So another reason why there's a vested interest in this idea of money vigilance. We're responsible for that. It's no different than any of the other major behaviors that we take on in our lives. If you're dealing with weight and you want to lose weight, on some level you're going to have to be vigilant. You're going to have to weigh yourself. You're going to have to see where you are and figure out where that goal is going to be. Is it losing 5 pounds, 10 pounds, or whatever it might be? But you have to quantify that, and you have to be vigilant. And the same holds true with everything associated with money. You've got to be vigilant on your spending. If you have any type of revolving debt of sorts or whatever that might be, there has to be an element of vigilance on both sides to be responsible to get where it is that you need to go.
And just for those listening to this episode thinking, okay, what are some things that I can do? Or what are some things that us as a couple can work on? Can you share a couple of probably quick wins, or a couple of just really simple ways for someone to improve or to work on their relationship with money? And I'm probably putting you on the spot here, but is there 1 or 2 points or 3 points that sort of just come to mind that you think, generally speaking, most people need to sort of at least be aware of?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's two big ones. The one we've kind of alluded to, and that is having goals. What are your goals? Where do you want to be financially in whatever given time horizon that you're gonna take on? Not having goals is disastrous, right? It's no different than getting in a car and not having a destination. I mean, yeah, it's fun to go for a ride once in a while, but where do you want to be? And then ultimately, what's it going to take to get there? The second element I really think about a lot is, how can we eliminate the friction from the things that we should be doing financially and add friction for the things that we shouldn't be doing financially? We live in a relatively frictionless world when it comes to our spending. There's an app for us to get everything. And so if we can add elements of friction to, our online spending apps of Amazon or whatever it might be, that's helpful. But on the contrary, when it comes to saving and investing, automated saving can really be helpful. How can we, whether it's some people do it on a daily basis or a monthly basis or whatever it might be, that we're setting aside money into a certain account, and we can label that and use what we call mental accounting and identify different accounts relative to different goals. But whatever we can automate in good behaviors leading to our goals is going to be helpful, as opposed to what tends to happen is life intervenes and we don't get there. So I like to keep it short and sweet with things. So I would go with goals and automation for my two big points today.
Yeah, no, very, very handy. Honestly, very handy points, and I'd agree with both very strongly. It's sometimes in these situations as well. It's keeping it simple. It's not complicating things too much, and focusing on the small wins. I've noticed, when it comes to looking at anyone's financial situation, or looking at talking to a client about a budget that they've never had. I find it's baby steps in a way, just to sort of keep it simple, go for the quick wins first. And I feel like momentum creates momentum and boosts confidence as well.
Absolutely. We start to see a change in behavior. And again, I think about that in terms of money. I think in terms of health, going back to this idea of this weight loss example, when you have a goal of losing weight and you make a behavior change of sorts, and then you weigh yourself a day, 2 days, a week later, and you see a result. You've lost a pound. There's no better feeling than going, my behavior change is working. What I'm doing is working. I haven't reached my goal yet, but I'm going to continue forward because what I'm doing is working. There's nothing better than that. And we can see that too when it comes to even simple saving or starting some sort of index fund where we're putting aside $25 a week or even a month to just start that process, begin that journey can be absolutely critical.
Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I guess if anybody wanted to contact you, or if they wanted to learn more about your book, or your books, I should say, what would you say is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. It's been my pleasure to be here. You could visit psychologyofinancialplanning.com to learn about our new book coming out in September. It's available on Amazon or all the other platforms. And also have a book called Numb, which gets into the attention and information age. And you could find that at charleschaffin.com.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll probably have you back on the show at some stage in the future as well, because this discussion has been so insightful. Honestly, it's I get excited about it. And I know many people listening to it are probably having a few aha moments as they are listening to it as well. So again, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And I want to thank you as well for the work that you do, helping people with this very, very topic.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's my pleasure, and I'd be happy to return anytime. And hopefully our chat was helpful to folks.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.